Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check today's video out. Got a good one for y'all today. It's going to help you catch some quality fish over the next couple months. We're going to be talking about fishing big lipless crankbaits during the pre-spawn. These are the 1 ounce and the 3/4 ounce size lipless crankbaits. Very technique specific. It's about the only time of year I use them, but we're going to go over in today's video and give you guys a good foundation about what to look for and how to fish them and the type of areas they work in. So, man, guys, I'm telling you, these big lipless crankbaits will catch hogs in the pre-spawn. So we're going to hopefully get you guys lined out in that area. Also, guys, I will link all these in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description. I'll put a bunch of lipless crankbait links in there. Like I said, when you order one, guys, just don't, the only two sizes you need are the 3/4 ounce and the 1 ounce. We're not talking about anything smaller than that. So I just highly suggest getting those big ones in today's video there. Really appreciate that. Okay, guys, this is one of the great things about just traditional normal bass fishing is it's constantly changing as far as the seasonal movements and the patterns and the moods and the personality of the fish. Every single month when you have longer daylight hours or shorter daylight hours or variations in the water temperatures rising or falling, it causes bass to do different things and prefer different lure categories. And a lot of times there are windows throughout the year, and these windows sometimes only last two to 4 weeks for the most part. And once that window is gone, the techniques are pretty much out the window, and that's pretty much true with the big lipless crankbaits we're talking about. Now, the three that I use here that I want to show you, number one is that this is the rattle trap, the 1 ounce rattle trap. This is a 3/4 ounce rattle trap. These are my two mainstays. And then I will use the 3/4 ounce red eye shad sometimes. But I'd say most of the time, I'm using the 3/4 ounce rattle trap. This one right here seems like it catches a bunch of fish. If I'm around bigger fish and a really nasty type day where the fish are really aggressive, I'll go up to the bigger 1 ounce size. And then with the red eye shad here, the red eye shad seems to work a little bit better under tougher conditions. Like if you have a little bit cleaner water that's marginally, almost too clear, or you have the tougher days like it's sunny with not much wind. For whatever reason, it seems like I get more on the red eye shad, but those are my three mainstays here. Okay, now let's talk about what you want to look for and the exact set of conditions and where you want to fish this at. This technique will work good on both lakes that have grass in them or do not have grass in it. And for so many years, the 3/4 ounce rattle trap was a mainstay fishing grass beds like all the guys in Texas. I remember the second Bassmaster tournament, guys, I ever fished was at Lake Sam Rayburn in 1986 at Lake Sam Rayburn. And I drew Tommy Martin out, former Bassmaster Classic winner. He was a guide on Rayburn, and he was catching them on a 3/4 ounce rattle trap in 1986. And I saw how effective it was with that. So everybody knows how effective the 3/4 ounces are. I'll tell you one other quick story about fishing grass with these things. I was fishing a Bassmaster tournament, one Bassmaster Top 150 down at Lake Gunnersville. Been a long time ago, probably 20 years ago. And Brent Chapman, a lot of you guys know Brent Chapman. He's a Bassmaster, he's a former Bassmaster Angler of the Year. He fishes the Bass Pro Tier now. Brent and I are good friends and we share information. And anyway, I was we were fishing that tournament at Gunnersville, and I was doing really good. I had like 20 pounds in the boat. And Brent comes over to me about, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We had like an hour to fish, and he didn't have a fish in the boat. And I said, well, man, there's a bunch of fish on this flat. Just get out here and start fishing. I was slow rolling a big spinnerbait. Brent put on a 1 ounce rattle trap, right fishing right there around me, and caught like 22 pounds of fish in an hour on this big 1 ounce rattle trap like this. So big ones will hit it. Okay, here's what you got to have for it. We'll talk a little bit about conditions. Number one, a lipless crankbait is always going to be better on your little bit nastier low light days. Not to say you can't catch them on it during any conditions out there, because you can, but like so many of the larger lures during the pre-spawn, when the water temperature is in the 50s, it helps if you've got clouds and wind. Clouds and wind really go a long way into activating the fish to hit these baits, because these are reaction lures. And a lot of times if the fish are not in a real aggressive chasing mood, you're not going to catch many on it. You might get a few occasionally on a reflex strike, but most of the time when you're fishing these baits that you reel faster through the water column, you need those low light days with some wind and you know, generally a little bit warmer type days. Really activates those fish a little bit better. So that's the number one thing, is to have that right type of weather condition when you choose this lure. Next to that is you got to have the right water visibility correlation. Now the best water visibility for a lipless crankbait is going to be your 2 to 4 foot range. Really more like 2 to 3 foot range. You can catch them in 4 foot of clarity on low light days, but perfect visibility is about 2 foot. I found that 2 foot of visibility, there's something about that as far as that type of a light intensity and clarity that the fish really react to these larger vibrating baits a lot better. So that's what I'm looking for. Structures, like I said, if you have a lake that has submergent grass, fish the submergent grass with it. Try to keep these lures in contact with the grass. You don't want to like reel them up higher in the water column. You want to make sure you let them fall down there where you're getting hung up in the grass occasionally. That makes a big difference. But for most people around the country, we don't have that. So you have to fish these baits, you know, around, you know, type of, you know, non-grass areas. Now, my favorite type of areas to fish a lipless crankbait on is some type of a pre-spawn area that has a flatter bank to it. Now, what this is going to be, sometimes this is a little bit confusing because a lot of times during the pre-spawn, you're going to find out your steep banks are the best, like your channel banks and your you know, bluffs and stuff. But when you're on a man-made lake and you're throwing a big lipless crankbait, what I like to do is I look for those areas where I think those fish are setting up to move back into spawn. So in other words, here would be a perfect situation. Let's say you're in your favorite lake, you go into one of the major creek arms. And in the creek arms, you've got coves off of those creek arms. And a lot of times those coves, bass will spawn in the back part of those coves, like the back half of those. If you can find a cove that is a good spawning cove, start out towards the mouth of that cove and work these lipless crankbaits just down those gravelly, rocky banks about halfway back into those coves. And when you're working these baits, guys, you have to keep them close to the bottom. When the water, and because the water temperature, I forgot to add that in there, these are best when the water temperatures are in the 50s. 50 to 60 degree water is perfect for this. So when the water temperatures are in the 50s, especially in the low to mid 50s, these fish aren't going to come up high out of that water column to hit a bait that's moving like this through the water column, you know, at a slow to medium or even medium fast pace. So throw it out there to the bank, let it hit the bottom, and just crank it at a medium crank like that, like a medium stop and go. And after you crank it 3 or 4 times, let it fall back down. So in other words, you know, you cast this thing out there, you let it sink to the bottom. You're reeling along the bottom like that, and as you're reeling it, a lot of times it tends to come up like that. So if you feel that the thing's starting to come up, just give it slack, let it fall back to the bottom, and try to keep it about that far off the bottom on those flatter banks. That's going to get you a lot more strikes with it. Another thing, guys, is on flat points. These things are really, really good around flat points because those same fish will stay up, they will stage on those flat points, and you can catch them on that. Normally, the depth that those fish are going to be on, as far as on the flat points or the flatter banks, depends on your water temperature. If that water temperature is closer to like 50 degrees and you have around 2 foot of visibility, look for those fish to be in like that 4 to 7 foot range. And if the water temperature is closer to 60, a lot of times those fish will get up there in 2 to 3 foot of water. They'll be really shallow. Now, if that water temperature gets up there close to 60, like it's upper 50s, around 60, I've done really good fishing these big lipless crankbaits around shallow targets on the bank. So if you have like a lay down tree in the water or stump or something like that, really target this thing around those lay down trees and stumps. Now, they're not very weedless. They get hung up. But guys, there's something about it. There's something about putting a lipless crankbait, a big lipless crankbait, next to a piece of an ambush point, like a stump or a lay down tree, that those fish will just attack that thing. They'll come out there and get it like they won't get a regular crankbait or a spinnerbait or a chatterbait. It's just the noise of the bait. It's just aggressive, and I've caught a bunch of good ones with that. I learned that from another guy. I drew a guy one time. We were fishing Lake of the Ozarks, and it was early March. Water temperature was around 50, 52 degrees. and he ripped them, you know, fishing a 3/4 ounce rattle trapper on shallow lay down trees. I learned a bunch by fishing with that dude, you know, 25 or 30 years ago. So the main thing, guys, is just go big with these lipless crankbaits. I think most people on a lipless crankbait, they stay with a 1/2 ounce size all the time. But do yourself a favor, guys. Just get you a 3/4 ounce and a 1 ounce size here. These two size, have them both in the boat with you. Most of the time, I'm throwing the 3/4 ounce one on 15 to 17 pound test Seaguar and Vizex, depending upon how deep I want to fish it. And I usually fish the 1 ounce model on 20 pound test Seaguar and Vizex there. Usually on the big one here, I'll fish the 1 ounce one on a flipping stick, and then the 3/4 ounce I'll fish just on a 7.5 foot, you know, medium heavy action bait cast rod. And that's the thing about it. It's like, since you're reeling these things pretty slow, you can get away with fishing a little bit heavier action rod. You don't need that flex quite so much on it. So anyway, guys, hope it helps you out. We'll talk later.